Could Gojo be a 15-finger Sukuna? Or perhaps I should say 16-finger Sukuna? Let's talk about it, but manga spoilers beware. First of all, shout out to Halbei for asking this question, and he wanted to know, in chapter 221, when Gojo first got unsealed, what would have happened if he had fought Sukuna right then, which was Sukuna at 15 or maybe 16 fingers of strength, given what we just found out in the most recent chapter. But we're not going to talk about that in this video. So, could Gojo have taken them out here, even though Kenjaku and uraume were right there as well? Alright, first of all, let's just get rid of the fodder, okay? He one-taps uraume, he does the same to Kenjaku, honestly. Gojo and Sukuna are just on such a different level, they don't even factor into this fight. So could this Gojo beat this Sukuna? And I think so. I do think that, 15 or 16 finger Sukuna would give Gojo a good fight, like it wouldn't just be a curb stomp or anything, but I think Gojo would win, considering how far he pushed 20 finger, or basically 20 finger Sukuna. Let's not get into the weeds on the mummy head and everything. I think that Gojo could therefore handle this weaker Sukuna. Now, there's a question to how Sukuna's fingers empower him specifically. Like, is this version of Sukuna's domain less refined compared to his 20-finger version? If so, then Gojo just wins the first domain clash and it's over like that, right? I would imagine it probably doesn't work that way. Like, I think their domain clash, even at this strength, would be pretty equal. But again, I think Gojo wins. But then this begs the question, why didn't Gojo take this fight right here? I don't think it's because he was afraid of the 3v1 or anything like that. The interesting things to consider are, clearly there are binding vows between Sukuna and Kenjaku. We don't know the extent of them, but I think that explains why they didn't take the fight. Why they didn't try to just go 3v1. Not that Sukuna would want to go 3v1, but at the very least why Sukuna didn't just immediately take this fight with Gojo. He has promises to keep before he can do that. But why wouldn't Gojo just go for it, right? He just got out of the prison realm. He hates Kenjaku, right? And of course, he's not a big fan of Sukuna either. I think the biggest thing here is the fact that this is Megami. Gojo comes, and he doesn't show it at all, but he is reacting to this, I think, that his basically adopted son is now being possessed by Sukuna. And I don't think he wants to just rashly take action here. He probably needs to go convene with everybody else and just see what the hell is up. Go huddle up with his other two adopted sons and formulate some sort of plan to rescue Megami. That's my best guess. If anybody else has any other ideas on maybe why that didn't just pop off right there, I would love to hear them in the comments. Next up, while we're on this subject, I have this question from DNA that wants to know, why did Kenjaku think that Gojo would pass away just because he put the prison realm at the bottom of the ocean, surrounded by cursed spirits, right? And I personally don't think Kenjaku expected that to be fatal for Gojo. I think his surprise was more so just at how quickly Gojo appeared in front of him. Because Kenny would have known the moment the prison realm had been opened and those cursed spirits that he set to guard it were destroyed. Because, just like his surveillance cursed spirits, because of cursed spirit manipulation, he'll have an awareness of when something passes away, right? So he knew Gojo had gotten out, and then very quickly Gojo was just there, right? So I don't think he fully understood the capabilities of Gojo's teleportation, and that's kind of where his surprise was coming from, and less from the fact that he thought Gojo would be gone, because he knows how strong Gojo is, right? That's one of the reasons he sealed him instead of taking him out, because he knew that was so hard, and also he didn't want another Six Eyes user to manifest, but that's neither here nor there right now. So yeah, I don't think he expected that to end Gojo, but I still think he was just surprised at how easily Gojo dealt with it. Continuing on the Gojo train here, we have this question from Munch Crunch that asks, can I go over any evidence against Gojo's return? And I can't really do that in the same way that I do for presenting evidence for Gojo's return, because Gojo being gone is like the face value conclusion that we're left with, right? So, he's bisected, bleeding out on the ground. The idea is that Gojo isn't coming back because he lost, right? So I don't think Gege would insert the same types of subtle theming and symbolism to the same things I point out for Gojo returning. I just don't think that exists to cement the fact that he's not coming back, because there's no reason to kind of double down on that after the fact he's already gone. Does that make sense? But I will say that in terms of the line you talk about here, the difference between winning by dying and winning even if you die, I think that's really relevant. And, whether or not it's Gojo or Megami or Yuji that ends up completing that narrative loop, if you will. Like, I do believe that we will see somebody kind of like fulfill that statement that Gojo told us. And obviously, if it was Gojo or Megami, that might make the most sense since that's how that information was presented to us. But I could also see Yuji being the one to fulfill that. Anyway, I'm not trying to like cop out, or I'm not trying to say that like Gojo's definitely coming back, so that's why I can't do this. I just don't think it makes sense to like present that type of list in the same way, if that makes sense. Next up, we've got this question from Piccolo that asks, how likely do I think it is that Yuji will use a binding vow in exchange for his life in order to ultimately beat Sukuna? And just like I was talking about how we could get that statement from Gojo fulfilled by Yuji, not that that has to happen, but I do think it could take the form of a binding vow or just some sort of self-sacrificial play, whether or not it's directly tied to a binding vow. I do think Yuji is going to do something like that. As it stands right now, I don't feel like Yuji's making out of this manga alive, but we'll have to see. And again, I could certainly see a binding vow just because of how prevalent those have been in the story, and I especially would like to see somebody break a binding vow, but that wouldn't be directly related to what you're asking. But yeah, I think that's totally in character for Yuji, and I would expect nothing less. Next up, we got this question from Montana, who wants to know my thoughts on a broken Megami fully consumed by the shadow facing off against Gojo in his return. The reason being that, you know, Megami's already at rock bottom, he's lost everything else, plus he finds out Gojo lied to him about Toji his whole life. Maybe they face off, right? Now, I do see some developments with Megami happening just because he's an integral part of this story, right? I think there's something else that's going to happen. You know, hopefully they save him, but he's at rock bottom. If he finds out the Toji information, that might set him over the edge. Like, he certainly won't be happy about it, I'm sure. But I don't see him going full bad guy, full heel turn. And I've talked about this a little bit in a video before, and if I remember, I will link it down in the pinned comments below. But I think there's a parallel between Gojo and Geto and Yuji and Megami. And, you know, best friends, and in Geto's case, he went to the dark side and Gojo couldn't save him. So Megami, we know, is not like going to the dark side, but he's broken and he's given up, and he may just completely give up, right? But I think unlike Gojo, who couldn't save Geto, I think Yuji can save Megami. So I think Yuji will save Megami, and there won't be like an evil bad guy Megami heel turn. Now, that being said, even if Yuji does ultimately redeem or save Megami, that doesn't mean he couldn't kind of go berserk for a little bit first. But I just think if Gojo comes back, it's going to be more likely to help against Sukuna or help against the merger and not to fight Megami. And to cap this off, I think this moment here, where we have foreshadowing Gojo talking about the 10 Shadows user that faces off versus the 6 Eyes Limitless user, I think that was already satisfied in Gojo's fight against Sukuna, who was in Megami's body, and not something that we could necessarily expect to happen between Gojo and literally Megami. And then finally for this video, I have this question from Roman, who wants to know, who besides Kenjaku do I think could survive Yuki's black hole? So this is a great question, but I think we got to throw some parameters on it, because if Yuki is going full out black hole, like not holding back and not having Tengen kind of help hold it back, then I don't think anyone can survive, because the whole planet's going to get destroyed, right? Now, like maybe somebody could manage to not get destroyed by the black hole itself literally, but then they're going to pass away because they're just lost in the vacuum of space, right? Like Gojo, for example, I think even if the planet destruction black hole happened, would be able to resist being pulled into it due to infinity, but he's still going to be toast, right? So if we're assuming it's kind of the restrained black hole, the same one Kenjaku had to face out against, then I think there's only a couple people that can survive this. Gojo being one because of infinity. We probably, due to his teleport, assuming he had the reaction time, like depending on how close he was, I think he could at least theoretically survive. Kirara potentially, again, depending on reaction speed here, how much time does Kirara have to use their curse technique? Because as we know, I mean, I have a video explaining Kirara's curse technique. It's kind of complicated, but I think they would at least be able to potentially survive. That's it for this one, y'all. Thank you so much for the support, and thank you for watching.